Hey there, Pastor Marc here. It's our prayer that this message would encourage and equip you in your relationship with Jesus. We're able to provide this content due to the joyful generosity of our financial partners. And if you'd be willing to join that tribe and help get some sermons like this around the world, you can donate at harvestbaptist.info/give. God bless.
We'll go to Acts chapter number 8. We're going to start our journey in Acts 8 this morning. I want to start just to set the stage with a little bit of maybe a picture or a story. I know many of you watched the Olympics as I did this summer. I always look forward to the Olympics. I enjoy the summer more than the winter, but I enjoy them both when they come around. And I enjoy watching the soccer or the basketball or the gymnastics or the diving or the swimming, whatever it may be. But I always enjoy track and field the most. That's what I want to tune into personally. And not just track and field. I like the pole vaulting and the disc throw and all that sort of stuff, but especially the track part of track and field. I love to see the races and to know who is the fastest man or the fastest woman on the planet right now and what world records are going to be broken. It's just fascinating to me. So I, like many of you, tuned in and got to see Noah Lyles win gold for USA in the 100-meter dash just by the smallest of margins. Seeing Gabby Thomas win a few gold medals for the country was a lot of fun. But I was really interested in the 4x100 men's relay race because we have some really fast guys. You know, we have the gold medalist and the bronze medalist in the 100-meter. It would stand to reason that if you're doing 4 people that are doing the 100-meter, that we do well at this. But for 20 years, we have not, as a country, medaled in that race. We haven't got a bronze, silver, gold, we got nothing. And this year was no exception because it seems like Summer Olympic after Summer Olympic, we keep bumbling and fumbling our baton handoffs. I don't know how or why this keeps happening. I'm not an expert on track and field. I don't know about the execution of all of that and how it's supposed to work. All I know is intentions were right and effort was high, but the execution of actually passing the baton from one member to another just wasn't good. When Christian Coleman went to hand the baton to Kenneth Bednarak here just a month or so ago, it just didn't happen. And in us fumbling, our hopes of winning any sort of medal in that race were immediately dashed. And those of you that watched it with me, you know that there was kind of like this pit in your stomach, like, oh man, again. And I think that can serve as a fitting window into the church's job when it comes to the scriptures and how really it is entrusted to every generation and even to every church to take the core truth claims about Jesus and pass those on, not only to a generation to come, but also to those that are of our same generation that maybe are new to faith, and to actually deposit into the hands and into the hearts of those around us what we've been entrusted with. To give them the truth of the gospel and to give them the scriptures so that they can have them and know them and love them and revere them as we do. And that is a fitting, I think, picture for our conversation that we've had now for about a month on the scriptures. And we've kind of walked through a logical sequence of studies on how we should view and use the scriptures. We want to do it just like Jesus did it, how they should be authoritative in our lives, and we do need some functional body of authority outside of us to actually check us and help us, and how we want to begin to employ those scriptures personally, how we want to study them and memorize them and meditate on them and read them in our own personal lives. And then last week was more of our corporate life. What do we want to be true of the pulpit ministry of our church, and how do we want the scriptures to flow? And we better keep our eyes on that and let the main thing be the main thing. And understanding that doctrinal integrity and biblical fidelity, even gospel centrality, that those are all very vital for us as a church. And this morning I want to just talk about how sometimes you need a mentor. There is, I think, a bridge in between your own personal, individual, relationship with the scriptures and then our corporate life and our relationship with the scriptures as a church. There's this bridge in between those two that I would call maybe mentorship, maybe discipleship, maybe teaching. where someone takes someone else, or someone takes maybe a small group of people and begins to invest in them and begins to help them grow and understand the scriptures. And there is a very biblical case for this. This is something that Jesus and the apostles were very good at, best I can tell. And then I want to make a cultural case for this, how what they did is not only just as needful as it was in the first century, but perhaps even more needful now than it was for us as a church and us as a culture. So let's just begin by trying to understand how that sometimes you need a mentor. And go to Acts chapter number 8. This is a brief story with so many little intricacies and implications. It's a beautiful story, but there's just one that I really want to push home to you. Acts 8, we are introduced to Philip, this disciple of Jesus and leader in the church, and how his life intersects with this Ethiopian man who's trying to understand the Bible. And here it is in Acts 8, verse number 26. It says, "The angel of the Lord spake unto Philip, and the angel said, Arise, go toward the south unto the way that goeth down from Jerusalem unto Gaza, which is desert. So Philip did it. He arose and he went. And behold, a great man of Ethiopia, a eunuch of great authority under Candace, queen of the Ethiopians, who had charge of all her treasure and had come to Jerusalem for to worship, was returning and sitting in his chariot to read Isaiah, or Isaiah as we would say, the prophet." So here is this dignitary, a treasurer, someone who has a lot of clout and power, who has gone all the way to Jerusalem to worship. We presume that he's some sort of God-fearer, someone who at least has a fundamental curiosity about this God of the Jewish people. Perhaps he's monotheistic and he believes that there's only one God and there's not this pantheon of gods, but he's at least curious about the worship there in Jerusalem. So he goes. We presume that he gets his hands on a copy of Isaiah the prophet, which is in your Bibles, somehow through a scribe or bought it. And I don't know, there's so many questions that I want to ask of, like, you know, if he's in his chariot, like, was the chariot moving as he was reading? Can you get chariot sick like you get car sick when you read, if that happens? When you got like a scroll from a scribe, how much did that cost you? Like, there's so many things we don't know. But Philip is instructed to go find this guy who's reading Isaiah. He's reading his Bible. He's doing a personal Bible study. And here's what happens. Verse 29, the Spirit says, "Go and join thyself to the chariot." So Philip ran thither to him. He heard him read the prophet Isaiah. So I want to know, like, why were you reading out loud? Right? Philip doesn't see him. He hears him reading it. Why out loud and not to yourself? I don't know. But he hears him reading. And he says, "Understandest thou what thou readest?" Or, hey, do you get it? Are you comprehending what you're reading? And here's the man's response. Beautiful response. "How can I, except some man should guide me?" I need someone to help me. I need a teacher. I need a mentor. I need someone to open this up for me and unpack it for me. Like, I need some assistance here. I'm doing my best, but I need some help. So the story goes on. In verse number 31, he desired Philip that he would come up and sit with him. The place of the scripture which he read in Isaiah was this: "He was led as a lamb or a sheep to the slaughter, like a lamb dumb before his shearer. So he opened not his mouth. In his humiliation, his judgment was taken away. Who shall declare his generation? For his life is taken from the earth." And the eunuch answered Philip and said, "I pray thee, or tell me, of whom speaketh the prophet of this? Of himself or somebody else? Some other man?" Who's this talking about? This person that is like led to the slaughter, this person that doesn't open their mouth even though their life is being taken from them, they're being snuffed out. Like, who is this talking about? And true to form, you know what Philip's going to say. Verse 35, Philip opened his mouth and began at the same scripture, and he preached unto him Jesus. The choir just sang, "We preach Christ." Why? Well, because that's what the apostles did. That's what Philip did here. He preached Christ to him. He preached Jesus to him. All this to say is that here's a guy who's doing his best to read the Bible on his own. He secured the Bible. He's apparently diligent about it. He's reading it. He's trying. But he needs some help. He needs someone to guide him. And I told you a couple weeks ago in our sermon on individual relationships with the Bible that you don't want to overcomplicate it and that it is possible for you to understand it for yourself and to read it for yourself, which I still stand by. But I also stand by the reality that sometimes you can use a little assistance. Sometimes it's helpful if someone takes you under their wing and they mentor you or they teach you. It could be maybe a commentator and they're helping you understand this passage of scripture and you're never going to meet that person. Or it could be someone within your local church that is going to serve as a mentor to you. But the idea of mentorship and discipleship and teaching, one person taking the truth of Jesus and transferring it to the next person, is something that is so deeply ingrained in the church, or at least it should be, that we better not miss this. And I just want to lay out, how did this happen, like in the first century? Like, how did Jesus do this? How did the Apostle Paul do this? How did Timothy, who was a Christian and a pastor, how did he do this? Because we know that, like from the Bible, it tells us. But then how should we do this? Like, how does that apply to our context? And what does this mean for us as a church family? So let's just start and do a really brief survey. And you're going to have to hang with me because I'm not going to be very pragmatic or practical until the very end. I try to lace in practicality as I go through a sermon, almost every sermon. This is one where the practicality is all back-end loaded, and I'll like a dump truck, I'll dump it on you at the end. You're just going to have to hang with me, okay? So how did this happen, like in the first century? Well, you have examples of Jesus and his disciples. So Jesus and his disciples have a teacher-student relationship or a rabbi-disciple relationship. Jesus did not invent discipleship. Most of you would know this. But some of you would be like, what do you mean? I thought that, like, being discipled was like a Christian thing, and wasn't that Jesus' idea? No. Discipleship was in the Greek culture. It was deeply ingrained into a Jewish culture. And when Jesus comes along and begins to disciple or mentor other people, he really just takes what was prefab already in the culture and runs with it. So in a Jewish culture, which Jesus lived in which you have the Gospels portrayed, there in Israel with Jesus and his disciples, you would have kind of three levels of learning. You would have a level of learning that just about everyone did. It went all the way up through grade school up until you were about age 12 or so. The first level is called Beit Sefer, School of the Book. And it's where young people went and they learned, but they predominantly learned reading and writing from a monotheistic, very biblical perspective. They learned predominantly from the book of the law, the first 5 books of the Bible, and there they would memorize huge chunks of the Torah and the thou shalts and thou shalt nots and what to do or what not to do, and they had this system of school. But most of the time, if you were 12 years old, school was done for you. You were going to go apprentice with maybe dad and learn the family business, start to contribute. If you were 12, it wasn't too long if you were a female before you were maybe going to get married at 13 or 14. Like, school wasn't going to go much longer than that. But there was a select group of students that really excelled at school that would be permitted to go to a new level of school that was ages 12 to about 15. You could almost think of it as middle school or maybe the beginning of high school. This was actually a little schoolhouse, oftentimes off of the synagogue, where you would go and you would begin to learn further the Old Testament. You would begin to dive into the Psalms and the prophets, and you would begin to memorize more and learn more. But the really, really, really talented students, like the people in our day and age that would maybe be accepted into Harvard or something like that, they would be invited to be part of a rabbinical school. Now, this wasn't a schoolhouse. This was living alongside of and with a rabbi for a long period of time. That if you were super duper smart, you were the valedictorian, you were awesome at school, you would be permitted, and it was an exceptional honor to be invited by a rabbi to go be a disciple. And oftentimes, the invitation would not be a letter in the mail that you got. It would be something like the rabbi extending an arm out to you and saying, follow me. And you knew what that meant. You knew that meant now we're gonna be together 24/7. I'm going to learn from this rabbi. I'm gonna try to be a carbon copy of them. I'm gonna be right alongside them. I'm gonna be their shadow with another 8, 10, 12 different individuals, a small group, like a cohort. We're gonna be together with this rabbi. So this will make sense of the Gospels. If you see Jesus, who is perceived to be a rabbi by his generation, walking along and finding people like mending their nets, he's like, follow me. And they're like, sure. They like leave everything and just follow him. And you're like, what? Why would you do that? Like you didn't have any conversation. Well, they intuited what we wouldn't naturally intuit, that this was a rabbi inviting them into school to be a disciple. And that was an honor that they would have never been afforded anywhere else. And it was like, I will jump at the chance and I will drop everything. This is a dream opportunity. So they do. And Jesus begins to disciple. He begins to teach them. He begins to mentor them. He begins to model for them what should be. So you find all kinds of examples like this in the Gospels of Jesus using his words to teach them, but then also demonstrating what should be done. So you would find things like Matthew 5, where Jesus gives this Sermon on the Mount, right? Where this young, up-and-coming, anti-status quo teacher from Podunk North, who like, how did a rabbi come from that place, stands up and delivers this like otherworldly body of truth that is so unbelievably rich that still to this day we're trying to dissect it and understand it and live by it. And you have these moments where he teaches them. And you have these moments where he models for them. If you remember Jesus with the disciples in Gethsemane where he was praying, it can be lost on you that he's being a rabbi to them in that moment, and he's trying to teach them, because the story goes that he tells them to come along, but to stay about a stone's throw off, like stay over there kind of by that door, and you can watch like a fly on the wall from a distance. You can watch me pray, and I want you to mimic this. I want you to pray. Of course, there's even moments where he taught them to pray because they were like, can you teach us to pray, please? And he did. But he's modeling for them and saying, do it with me, do it alongside me. Or there were moments where he would release them for a short period of time and say, hey, you've seen me minister. You go minister. I'm going to pair you up in twos, and I'm going to send you out, and I'm not going to give you a suitcase or clothes or money. You're just going to go do it and trust me, and then you're going to come back and report. And they would do these small little bite-sized pieces, all working up to eventually he's going to leave. And like, Rabbi, no more. I'll leave my spirit with you, but now you're on your own. And their job then was to take the baton and to go invest and mentor other people and disciple other people, which is where you get the Great Commission from, right? Jesus' like last words to his disciples are in Matthew chapter number 28, where he says, go, teach all nations, baptize them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, and teach them to observe all things whatsoever I have commanded you. Here's the point. What's happening? What's happening is discipleship. What's happening is Jesus taking 12 guys, putting them under his wing. He's down to 11 now because Judas just betrayed him. And then taking those 11 and saying, like, your turn. You go find some people, and you go put them under your wings, and you go help them and invest in them, right? And this model, albeit it starts to change a little bit, but fundamentally stays the same as you begin to read through the New Testament in the early church. So you go from Jesus, and then you find someone like Paul with Timothy. And Paul is not a rabbi and Timothy his disciple. It's not that exact same model. They're dissimilar enough to where you can differentiate them. But they're similar enough to where they would still fall under the same umbrella of mentoring and modeling and discipling. And you find like Paul writing to Timothy, his protege, his son in the faith as he would call him, in 2 Timothy. So if you would, just take a peek with me. 2 Timothy chapter 1. This is the very beginning of this letter, and it starts out by saying, Paul, an apostle of Jesus Christ by the will of God. So we know who's writing it. Paul's writing it. Verse number 2. To Timothy. That's helpful. This is from you to you. But then he mentions this, my dearly beloved son. And you can start to see immediately some of the relationship that these guys had. They spent a lot of time together. Paul had Timothy under his wing. And Timothy, you're like a son to me. He wasn't flesh and bone son. But Timothy, you're my spiritual son. You're my son in the faith, as it were. He goes on to say in chapter number 2, just like a quick jump over on the page, thou therefore my son. Why could he call him son? Because there was a fundamental relationship that was almost father and son. It was very familial or paternal even, where he was like, you are like a kid to me. In the same way that if you ever had a great coach, you may have had almost like a coach that served as like your football dad or your soccer dad or your basketball dad, and they really invested in you, and there was this relationship that was there. And he tells Timothy this. He says, my son, be strong in the grace that's in Christ Jesus, and the things that thou hast heard of me among many witnesses, the same commit thou to faithful men who shall be able to teach others also. Are you seeing the pattern? I have invested in you. I have mentored you. So I want you to go find some mentees, and I want you to invest in them. And when you invest in them, the goal would be that they're going to be able to go invest in some other people down the line. Here's the point. From Jesus and his disciples and this kind of teacher-student, rabbi-disciple relationship, or from Paul and Timothy in this father-son familial relationship, or even what Timothy's being encouraged to do here as a pastor, Timothy's a pastor, to his congregation to go find some other guys and to be able to invest in them, this mentor-mentee relationship. All of those are communicating the same basic fundamental premise that we need sometimes, many times even, just as the Ethiopian eunuch needed with Philip, someone to teach us, someone to guide us, someone to help us, someone to steward us in some way, shape, or form. And it has always been the church's responsibility to provide avenues for this to happen so that these relationships can develop and flourish, and there can be mentorship that happens, not just from a pastor to a sheep or a congregation, but also amongst the congregation for that to be able to happen within itself, both systematically and organically. And this idea of you taking in your life in Jesus and learning and even being taught the scriptures through other people is so part and parcel of what the church is. And this idea of that's been around for centuries, millennia, now begins to lay on top of our cultural moment, and I would argue that in our cultural moment, it's needed more than ever. Here's why this is needed more than ever, in my estimation. When I began to train for ministry, I was just out of high school and I went straight into Bible college. I just turned 18. And I went through my bachelor's degree, so kind of 18, 19, 20, 21. Then I went through my master's degree, and then I began to minister in California, and then went back to school and got my MDiv, and then began ministry here. When I began, it's almost 20 years ago. 19 years. 2005 is when I started beginning to train for vocational ministry and then starting to exercise that and do ministry. And that was maybe preaching at a little small country church because my bachelor's degree was in Arkansas. So there were these little, churches of 40, 50 people all over the place. And the pastor would get sick and they had no one to fill the pulpit, so they'd call the college, and then some dean of students or someone would call you, hey, you want to preach? Yeah, I'd love to. And so you'd go and you'd preach for a weekend or something. Or even as time went on in my Bible college days, I began to be employed very part-time by the church that was there, just helping with youth ministry and those sorts of things. And I began that journey now almost 20 years ago. And when I started, and I feel like an old person saying like, when I started, or like 20 years ago, but my hair is falling out, so I guess I can talk like an old person now. I'm losing the battle with my hair, and sometime in the next 12 months, you're gonna show up and I'm gonna have it shaved. I'm just gonna be done with it. So don't be surprised. I'm warning you now, the day's coming in the near future. Because I try as I may, I'm not winning that battle. 20 years ago when I started, it was hard to get quality content. It was hard to come by. You had to work hard, even pay a significant amount of money to get it, but relationships were aplenty. So when I began my ministry journey, like We're back 2005, okay? You got a few years till the iPhone comes out. So if you wanted quality content, you went to church and you heard the sermon, or you went to a different church for their revival meeting and heard, some other guest preacher or something. And that was about it. There was a little bit of maybe some sermons on TV that you had to kind of tread through those waters carefully. There was maybe, if you knew this, preacher of yesteryear comes on the radio on this day at this time, you could work your lunch break around it to go hear your favorite preacher on the radio. But those were your options. Outside of that, if you happen to stumble across maybe a pastor or a preacher that they resonated with you and you wanted content from them, you had to call their church office and ask them if they ever recorded their sermons, because most of them did not, and if they would perhaps put them on a CD for you and ship them to you for $8 shipping and $5 per CD. You weren't going to do that very often, and many churches didn't do that. You're talking about a day when church websites were optional. Right? You fast forward even a few years, and iPhone's just coming out. There are no YouTube channels with your favorite preachers. There are no podcasts. There is no at your fingertips, free, accessible, easy content. There is no Bible app on your phone. Your phone is a Motorola flip razor. You remember those? We were sweet with those things. Or if you were super lucky and business oriented, you had a BlackBerry with email on it, maybe. You were awesome if you had that. There was no audio Bible on your phone for free. If you wanted audio Bible, you had a stack of CDs about that big. Pray to God you can find which one Malachi's on and skip over to it. It was going to take you 8 years to get to where you were supposed to be. You remember those days? Can I get a witness? Content was hard to come by. So if you came across a preacher that you really liked, this is why many churches back then would build an auditorium that was double the size of any crowd they ever had on a Sunday morning, because they planned on twice a year to have a revival meeting and to have the visiting pastors on the circuit or evangelists or ever come in, and all the churches from the area would bring their people over to that one church to hear their favorite preacher, because you couldn't hear them otherwise. You weren't going to be able to Google them and find their sermons or their blogs or whatever else. That was not an option. But you did have rich relationships. It was very different 20 years ago. The nuclear family was far more intact. Many of you remember what it was like to go to school, and if you were there in math class, and there were, 1 or 2, maybe 3 kids who came from a split home or a divorced home, that was the exception. It was rare. That's not the case anymore. Even if their parents didn't get along, they were still going to stick it out until the kids, grew up and got married, and then they were going to get divorced later on. But that wasn't going to happen. So you had family relationships that were far more intact. You had no one worked from home, right? When you went into the workplace, you went into the workplace. You didn't work from your home office. So you had water cooler conversations. And you had picnics with the company. And you had a mentor that you were new to the company, and they'd take you under their wing. Hey, I've been here 10 years, 15 years. Let me show you the ropes. Let me teach you how it works. I know that they're going to say this, but they actually mean this. And that was going to happen organically. It's very different now. Even how we met our spouses, that has changed so drastically over the course of 20 years. Out of curiosity, we're going to show you this graph, but if you're my age or older, so I'm 37 or older, let's do a raise of hands. Let's do a poll here, poll the audience. How many of you 37 or older met your spouse through another personal connection? Your mom, your dad, your cousin, your coworker introduced you. Hey, I know them, and they would be good for you. They set you up on a blind date, whatever, they introduced you. How many of you were like that, okay? A good handful. How many of you, if you're older than me and you met your spouse, met through some sort of social gathering? It was, the country club, the church, the bar, wherever you migrated with all the other people. How many of you met that way? Okay, quite a few of you. A lot of bar hoppers, I got you. How many of you met, if you're older than me, you met your spouse online? All right, a couple, a handful. That switch, I think we have this graph, right? Every way that people met used to be through other people. They've all plummeted to 5% or below, and the amount of people that now meet online is by far the majority. Is that a right or a wrong thing? It's not a right or a wrong thing. I'm not being critical of that at all. All I'm doing is recognizing the moment we live in and how it is different than it used to be. How it used to be that it was hard to get quality content. I mean, you had Sunday morning, and then oftentimes you had a Sunday night church, because Sunday night, like, you weren't gonna get any content unless you came back Sunday night. There was no other option. But relationships were all over the place. Now, for you to get content on demand for free at your fingertips, whether it be the show that you like to binge or whether it be your favorite preacher. If you have a Mount Rushmore of preachers, you could go home today and in a matter of 20 minutes, you could find 50 sermons from every one of them for free online. Easy. Now there's all this content that is all over the place, much of which you have to pay nothing for. But now there is this dearth of relationships and this wave of loneliness that's come over much of our society. And the point I'm trying to make is that the sands have shifted beneath our feet. And it is important for us to recognize as a church that has happened, to recognize the realities of those situations, and to try to be able to address it in a profound way. So what this means practically and pragmatically for us is a lot, but part of what it means is that people that are coming to church or sticking to church like ours, that the sermon that I deliver on Sunday actually carries a little bit less weight and is a little bit less of a needle mover in their life than it used to be. And I do not say this for one instance. Don't hear what I'm not saying. I am not saying this at all to diminish the pulpit ministry in its efficacy or its sacredness. I'm not saying that we should diminish that or take our foot off the gas pedal there. I am saying, though, that if people had a list of needs from a church, it used to be that the vast majority of them would put at the top of their list the Sunday sermon quality content. Many of you would still have that at the top of your list. No problem with that at all. If you have a list of needs, I do this in premarital counseling with couples, that they get this smorgasbord of words, and they have to rank what they perceive to be their top 5 needs. So there's loyalty and honesty and intimacy and all these different things, and they get to rank what they feel is most important to them. If someone did that with a church, it used to be that the content or the sermon was at the top of the list almost always. Now, that's not normally the case. It's on the list somewhere, but it's down a few pegs. Why? Because, to be honest, you can get a sermon just as good as mine, if not better than mine, for free easily. You know, you have to know where to look, and you have to use some wisdom there, but it's not that hard. I don't think I'm the end-all, be-all. Like, it's not that hard to get quality content now, but now to get deep relationships and mentorship, it is hard to come by. And there's an opportunity that now exists for the church, I believe, the American church in 2024, that didn't used to exist like it does now. There's a beautiful window of opportunity for the church to step in and say, let us be the place, because people are looking for this. In a day and age of individualism and tribalism and loneliness, people are looking for quality, close-knit, tight, loving relationships where someone will invest in them. People want this. Young people want this because it's hard for them to find it anymore. And the point is strictly this. This has always been a need for the church. Jesus needed to disciple 12 guys. Paul needed to take Timothy under his wing. Timothy needed to take other men under his wing. They needed to take others under their wing. This has always been a need for the church, but there is, in my estimation, a beautiful window of opportunity for the church to actually thrive at this, and there are people looking for it more now than perhaps there ever used to be. And with that being the case, there, I think, is an admonition to each and every one of you, whether you would find yourself on the mentee side of the equation, like somebody teach me, somebody help me, somebody invest in me, or the mentor side of the equation, where you would say, I haven't arrived, I'm not Jesus, but I have some semblance of spiritual maturity, and I probably could teach someone else a thing or two. Not to be prideful or boastful, but to recognize that I could do that. No matter which side of that you're on, there's an admonition, I think, for each and every one of you this morning to pursue that. To go give of yourself as a mentor or to go find some mentors. And we as a church want to systematically try to create pathways for that to happen, but we also organically want it just to happen all on its own. We want both of those things to be true so that more Ethiopian eunuchs can find Philips, so that more Timothys can find Pauls, so that more Matthews can find Jesuses and can find those that will invest in them. So let me give you just a few pragmatic, practical takeaways that hopefully will put this down to earth for each and every one of us. And I'll try to give it on both sides, whether you're like, please mentor me, or whether you're like, I could mentor somebody. So there are a few that I've written down here, and for sure you could expand on these. And don't see this as like an exclusive list that you have to stick to. If you want to be creative and do something all on your own, then hats off to you. Go for it. But here are a few ways perhaps you could find and discover this through this local body. Number one would be jump into a group. We push this all the time, and we'll keep pushing it, and we'll keep beating the drum. You can go on our website, harvestbaptist.info/groups. And there you can actually sign up to have a group. What's a group? It's a smaller grouping of the church that is more relationally oriented. So if you were to take the last 3 weeks and put them all together, here's what I'm trying to communicate. You need to be in the Bible all by yourself. You need to have a relationship with it for yourself. We also as a church need to have a pulpit ministry and stay true to the word and have this big room with lots of people. We need those. But in the middle of that, there's something else that you need that's very relationally oriented, community oriented, that is actually discovering your faith and learning and growing through other relationships. And for us, our group system is kind of the primary staple that we use for that. We made a shift, we've made a number of shifts over the last 2, 3, 4 years that I did feel were needful and have still felt were needful for us that have been to try to be relationally oriented. Some of you remember a few years back that we completely restructured our entire group's program from a small handful of Sunday school classes, more or less, that were all master teacher model. It was one teacher and then a row of 20 or 30 or 40 people teaching content. And we still have some of those and we're grateful for them. But we shifted and expanded that and rolled out a lot of groups that were more circles and were led for sure. And there's some mentoring there, but they're more relational and they're more conversational. That was intentional on our part on recognizing what's happening in our culture and how we need to address those things and meet those needs and be relational in that way. We've done similar things in our youth ministry where on Wednesday nights when they get together for youth group, it's not always just the group, but once a month they break up into smaller groups. And they begin to have deeper relationships with those people and even some deeper mentoring, we would say. So there's a number of shifts that we've made. We've rolled out a mentorship program for our ladies, and I hope in the next 12 months or so to roll one out to complement it for men as well, that is directly a mentorship program. We have a discipleship program as a church. I could go on and on. Even our academy, some of that is because we want to invest in a next generation and we want to be able to have teachers and students and teach them not just academics, but teach them the truth of God's word and a Christian worldview and how to honor God with their lives. And we want that to be the case. What am I saying? I'm saying all of these are systematic investments as a church, and even some are shifts as a church that we have made to try to do this better. We have not arrived. We are not perfect. But we're wanting to do it systematically. And part of that system is groups. And if you're not in one, I would encourage you, get in one because you're going to make some relationships. If you're on the side where you're in a group, but you know you could lead a group, but you're just sitting there as a participant, I would admonish you to strongly consider and pray about leading a group. I know it would be outside of your comfort zone. I know it would be a stretch. I know it would maybe be a little bit more of a time commitment, but it would be a good thing if you have the capacity to be able to mentor someone else to actually step up to the plate and decide I want to do that. So groups would be an option. You also have like our growth track. That's just 6 or so months new. We promoted it here today. You can sign up on our church app or on our website for it. But that growth track is designed to be a smaller group of people. Our pastors do 90% of the teaching in growth track so that we can get like down in the weeds with you a bit more, get to know you a bit more, have more conversations, and those are coming out of growth track already. It's purposely designed to be a bit more intimate and to be able to get to know people better and encourage people in their faith better, and that may be something that you would want to sign up for. You can find a mentor. I mentioned this that our ladies have, if you go to harvestbaptist.info/mentorship, that there you can find a mentee or sign up to be a mentor. Guys, you're gonna have to be patient on that. That'll come in due time. But ladies, it's there for you right now. Once again, if you need it, go find it. If you're 14 years old and you feel like, hey, I love my mom and the mentorship she provides, but I'd love another lady in the church, that's fine. If you're 24, if you're 64, go find one. If you can be one, sign up, please. And don't make the mistake to think that you have to have your whole life together, okay? To be a mentor, this is good to remember. If you're leading a group, you're discipling somebody, you're being a mentor, let's go ladies. You do not have to be like Betty Crocker in the kitchen and a fashionista and the wife and mother of the century, and you don't have to be all of those. Just sign up for what you think you could teach someone else in. If it's like, listen, he does all the cooking, I don't touch a cookbook, so don't ask me about that. But if you want to know about how to be a good mom, I could probably teach you something there. Or you want to know about how to raise a team? I don't know, I'm trying to figure it out. But you want to know how to instill some obedience into a 3-year-old? I've been there, done that, I know how to do it, let me help you, right? You don't have to know everything. But if there are a few things that you know or know well, then pass those on. It's not like you have to be maybe you know the scriptures well and your study habits are awesome, but your personal evangelism is weak and you chicken out every time you get an opportunity to share your faith. Well, then sign up to be a mentor on studying the scriptures and go get a mentee for personal evangelism and let someone teach you. You see how that works? The point is, you don't have to be like perfect or a model or somehow just exactly like the Apostle Paul or somebody. You can take what you're good at and pass that on to somebody else, and we need that. We need that. Here are some suggestions that aren't really systematic to the church, but maybe are just more organic. Go find a prayer partner. You say, what's that? That is my loose way of saying someone that you pray with on the regular. That could be daily. I've had some prayer partners in my life that have been daily, where we said every day for a month, we're gonna call each other and pray together over the phone. I've done that on a handful of occasions. That could be weekly. Hey, we're gonna check in every week, we're gonna see how each other are doing, and one-on-one, we're gonna pray for each other. That could be monthly, it could be whatever you want it to be, honestly. Pick Tuesdays and Thursdays if you want. But that's something you can do all by yourself that you don't need my permission for. You don't need a program for that. You find someone in your small group, or you find someone that sits down the row from you every single week, because we all tend to sit kind of in the same spots. And you get to know them and develop a relationship with them, and it may be you're in church, okay? People are here probably because they have some sort of like affection for the Bible or prayer. If someone's here, they probably don't hate praying. I'll just throw that out. Ask them, hey, this may be weird to you, ever done this? I've never done it, but you wanna be a prayer partner? You wanna pray, once a week together, exchange phone? You can do that. You can also just ask someone to lunch as a mentor or a mentee, and I would encourage both of you to be on the hunt. If you need some mentorship, try to find someone that's in the kids ministry line with you and they'll pick up their kids, and oh my word, your kid listens to you. Like, you tell them to do something and they obey you and they don't like throw themselves on the floor in a tantrum. How did you do that? Maybe, just a suggestion, maybe say, hey, I could use some help there. Like 2 weeks from now, would you want to get lunch? I'll pay for it, my dime, but you want to go get lunch after church? I'd love to ask you some questions about parenting. If you are a mentor, find someone around you who's new. Hey, man, how long have you been coming here? Oh, second week. Man, we love to get to know people. We've been here 20 years. We'd love to get to know you better. You want to catch lunch next month sometime? Like those things are things that you can do organically. And what is happening in those moments? Relationships are being formed, and out of those will come mentorship. If you're intentional about it and you're looking for it and you're purposeful about it, you can find it or you can give it. You honestly can. You could also, 6 on here is you could go through a discipleship program that we have. We have a prefab program. It's 14 lessons long. And it teaches you kind of some systematic theology and some of the major truth claims of Christianity. It also will teach you how to develop a prayer life and how to study the Bible on your own and some of those sorts of kind of basic hands-on learning when it comes to Christianity. And Dave Miller's email is on your outline today because he coordinates our mentors and our mentee in discipleship. And he would love to pair you up one-on-one or two-on-two if it's maybe a couple with another couple. And if that's something that you want to be a part of as a mentor or as a mentee, please shoot him an email. We would love to get you on that list. We'd love to make those connections. Nothing would thrill my heart more than if 6, 7, 10, 12 different discipleship pairings came out of this sermon today because people need it and want it. You can also sign up to teach or lead in a team. If you're like, hey, when you talk about your words and just, training or teaching, like I'm more of a do-it person. I just like to kind of be quiet and just go work. Well, we have a ton of teams. We would love for you to lead in a team. If you have that capacity, we would love for you to jump on, take some people under your wing, show them the ropes of, hey, here's how we do this, here's how we greet, here's how we do kids ministry. Here's the point. I'm trying to be very practical and pragmatic and giving you 5, 6, 7 different things here of ways that you can implement this. Now, there's a danger. If I give you one and say, go do this one, a lot of you will do it because I limited your options. There's something in our human nature that when you line up 20 different types of Oreos, ever been to Walmart? And you're like, what do they think of next? Cotton candy Oreos, pumpkin spice Oreos, Oreos, double stuffed, mega stuffed, thin, and you can't choose one then, right? There's so many options that you get like paralysis by analysis and you don't choose anything. Well, actually, you probably take some Oreos still, but it takes you longer to choose, right? For the record, if Oreo could invent a pack that had like a sampler pack where you could try all of them in one, that would be a great idea. Because I never want to pay the money for the whole pack, right? What if I don't like the first one? Then it's wasted. It's beside the point. Nabisco, if you're tuning in, I got an idea. I'm giving you a lot of options, and there's a danger that you're like, oh, that one sounds good. Ooh, that one would be helpful too. Ooh, that one, and then you do none of them. Don't do that. Pick one. I don't know which one's going to be best. One will be better than none. Circle one and go try it. You can always switch. You're not stuck. But the fundamental premise of our relationship with the Scriptures is that you need individual time with God and His Word. And corporately, we want that to be rich. But in the middle, there is this, with my church family corporately, but also very personal, mentorship relationships that can and should happen. And I want to encourage you to find them and to seek them, whether you're giving as a mentor or receiving as a mentee. Don't negate this or neglect this. This is something that can take you further and faster in your Christian life than many other things. Your personal Bible study serves a purpose. This sermon serves a purpose, but they don't serve every purpose. There is validity to the reality that we need a rich web of relationships within our faith, and that we need to find them and develop them and nurture them. If Jesus and his disciples needed it, and Paul and Timothy needed it, and Timothy and his congregation needed it, I dare say, maybe, perhaps, we would need it as well, and that we should go find it if we do.